The question of recognition is for me an important one, for if we say that we believe all human subjects deserve equal recognition, we presume that all human subjects are equally recognizable. But what if the field of appearance does not admit everyone? What is that? How is it that that field is regulated in such a way that only certain kinds of beings can appear as recognizable subjects and others not? This is surely one question posed by the animal rights movements, since why is it that only human subjects are recognized rather than non-human living beings? That question is linked with and confounded by another, namely, which humans count as the human, which humans are eligible for recognition within the sphere of appearance, which are not, and what do we call those who do not and cannot appear as subjects within hegemonic discourse? We know this question in one way from the theory of gender. There are sexual and gender norms that condition what and who will be legible and what and who will not, and that expose those who fail to register within intelligibility to differential forms of social violence. So, in order to understand those forms of living gender in its full complexity, we have to understand the ways in which gender is misrecognized or remains unrecognized, precisely because those who live on the margins or in non-conforming ways are testing the limits of established norms for thinking embodiment and even personhood. Are there forms of sexuality for which there is no good vocabulary, precisely because the powerful logics that determine how we think about desire, orientation, sexual acts and pleasures do not admit of certain modes of sexual pleasure, practice, or orientation? The performativity of gender is bound up with the differential ways in which subjects become eligible for recognition. Recognition depends fundamentally on whether there is a media, a form of presentation in which the body can appear. This is another reason why the aesthetic domain and the theatrical domain is so important for contesting the arbitrary limits that are imposed on the field of appearance. Even though something called full recognition is a fantasy, and one that locks us into a certain phantasm of who we might be or should be, certain ways of being deprived of recognition surely also threaten the very possibility of persisting. To be a subject at all requires first finding one's way with certain norms that govern recognitions, norms we never chose. And so, if we cannot find our way within available norms of gender or sexuality, or we only find our way with great difficulty, we are exposed to what it means to live at the limits of recognizability. To exist at such a limit means that the very legibility, the very viability of one's life is called into question, what we might call the social ontology of our persistence. In some standard liberal discourses, subjects are thought to be those kinds of beings who come before an existing law and ask for recognition within its terms. But we have to ask a prior question: what makes it possible to even come before the law, to appear before the law, to have the status of one who can appear before the law? Kafka asked this question, by the way, in some rather good formulations. One has to have access or status. One has to be able to enter into a space to appear in some form. And here we can think about the situation of undocumented workers, or those whose status is criminalized from the start, but who require both rights and obligations, protections, and the powers of citizenship. So what is at stake when we seek to understand performative politics in its struggle from and against precarity? As we know, not everyone can take for granted the power to walk on the street or into a bar or even a restaurant. To walk on the street alone without police harassment is precisely not to walk with the company of others and whatever non-police forms of protection that supplies. And yet when a transgendered person walks on the street in Ankara or in McDonald's in Baltimore, there's a question of whether that right can be exercised by the individual walking in alone. If the person is extraordinarily good at self-defense, perhaps it can. If it is in a cultural space where that is accepted, it surely can. But if and when it does become possible to walk unprotected and still be safe, for daily life itself to become possible without fear of violence, then it's surely because there are many who support that right, even when it is exercised by one person alone. So I may exercise it, but I can only exercise it effectively if I have the support of many. If the right is exercised and honored, it is because there are many there, even if they are not there, exercising it as well, whether or not anyone else is on the scene. Each I brings the we along as he or she enters or exits that door, finding oneself in an unprotected enclosure or exposed out there on the street. We might say that there is a group, if not an alliance, walking there too, whether or not they are anywhere to be seen. It is, of course, a singular person who walks there, who takes the risk of walking there, but it's also the social category that traverses that particular gait and walk, that singular movement in the world. And if there is an attack, it targets the individual, and it targets the social category at the same time. Perhaps we can still call performative both the exercise of gender and the embodied political claim to equality and the protection from violence, and to be able to move with and within this social category in public space. To walk is to say that this is a public space in which transgendered people walk, that this is a public space where people with various forms of clothing, no matter how they are gendered or what religion they signify, are free to move without threat of violence or threat of arrest. So when we say that bodies matter, as I think we do say, we are asserting the value that bodies have. We are also pointing to the lived modality of these bodies, understood not only as their pure matter, but as their way of living. Matter, we might say, if there is pure matter, it's always organized in and through a way of living. We cannot we cannot easily separate the conditions and needs we call material from the cultural and economic organization of those realities. The body never appears to us outside of a framework, a mode of perception, a field of appearance, an historical and cultural world. So when bodies are deprived of food and shelter, health care, mobility, and sexuality, and we become aware that such basic tasks, such fundamental rights, depend on a just and equitable organization of the social and political world. Our bodies only come to matter within the context of a just and equitable polity. So when we struggle for such a polity, we struggle for the conditions that will secure and safeguard our own survival and flourishing. And when we struggle for bodily rights, embodied freedoms, including gender freedom, we affirm a political future based on fundamental principles of what I would call radical democracy. We might do well to remind ourselves that we are all potentially precarious, and that is why we join the struggles against austerity. We oppose the decimation of public life, its privatization. We seek to support new movements that oppose accelerating inequalities. Precarity does not fully define any of us, and yet it is a possibility that can affect all of us under certain conditions. If I am to survive and to flourish, even to attempt to lead a good life, it will be a life lived with others, a life that is no life without those others. I will not lose this I who I am. Rather, whoever I am will be transformed by my connections with others, since my dependency on another, even my dependability, are necessary in order to live and to live well. Our shared exposure to precarity is but one ground of our potential equality and of our reciprocal obligations to produce together conditions of livable life. In avowing this need we have for one another, we avow as well basic principles that inform the social democratic conditions of a livable life. These are critical conditions for democratic life in the sense that they are part of an ongoing crisis, critical in the sense of relating to a crisis, but also because they belong to a form of thinking and acting that responds to the urgencies of our time. I guess my final suggestion is this: Let us continue to be responsive, even when it seems we may become overwhelmed, even when it seems that there is no hope. For in responding to what we see, responding to what happens to others, responding to the conditions in which precarity becomes more and more the norm, we stand the chance to remain animated creatures, animated and thinking with desire, hope, rage, and sorrow. We keep the senses alive, and so we live on as the embodied lives that we are and that we deserve to be. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, can you please turn on the lights, because it's really difficult to see people from here, okay?
Even it out a little here.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so from now on you can ask your questions, please. Put your hands in the hand, please.
Anybody have some questions?
Let's see. Okay.
It's a gentleman.
I just want to collect 3 or 4 questions, okay? No, sorry, I want to collect, okay?
Oh, you want to collect them written?
Yes.
In written form?
No, it's not necessary to read. So, okay.
But did you
It's
not
just
call
to
him?
have 3 or 4
Oh, okay.
questions, okay?
But I'm just asking
me
what
for-
your sequence
okay.
is.
Okay.
Did you call on him or
The
no?
first person.
He's the first
okay.
person.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first person is there, and
Judith Butler, how could you define, please, I know that it is a difficult question, radical democracy?
Okay, yes.
another person, please. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. How do you think or feel that bodies in assembly can reconfigure or disturb what is accepted or considered the sphere of appearance?
The sphere of
Appearance.
Next, please.
Two questions from people watching us online. The first one is, why gender trouble? Why not gender problem or gender issue? The second one is, how to fight the norm in this binary world. We need tools.